Hi, I'm Astrid Ho, and I'm the board chair of Cultural Pluralism in the Arts Movement Ontario. We've invited three artists, the three visual artists, whose work we had exhibited, and also did an interactive session with us in the fall of 2018. And we have them here today. We'll start with just, if you could speak briefly about your work, and also about the work that you had exhibited in the gathering. So Wayne, if you'd like to start.
Certainly. So my work is basically the work that I exhibited, and I think it's easiest to start with that, is a project around an image of my face. And starting with an image of my face is something that I've been using in my practice for over 20 years. And this particular image is modeled specifically around, it's referencing the history of escaped black slaves. There's a history of American slave owners putting advertisements in Canadian magazines and newspapers looking for their slaves who escaped. And those images were, because it was in the the 1800s, it's kind of like a hashtag. It's like what do they call it? It's like pen and ink drawings. It's very sketchy, really kind of loose. So there was something in the notion of the poster and the image of a person being pursued and always looked at that I think was something that I wanted to be part of my work for a long time. Because really I'm interested in the way that we find ourselves interacting with those who are different from ourselves, and what's happening in that moment of discovery when we meet someone who's not like us, and what's going on. So I'm using this image of myself in that provocative sense, and I'm really interested in how that image is reflected within the viewer. Quite often when we encounter another person, we actually are doing this kind of, it's all unconscious, but we're doing this kind of mental exercise where we're trying to project ourselves into them. Like, how much of ourselves do we see in another person? And I think what I'm really interested in is that moment of discovery. So that exploration of that moment of discovery is something that influenced my earlier projects. My first project in this area, I entitled the Degradation and Removal of the /a Black Male. And I took that poster, it's just small, like an 8.5/11 of my face that was degraded to look kind of like a slave poster. And I put up 400 of them in Toronto and Montreal, and then I photographed them as they were written upon and degraded by time and all sorts of things. And then I took those images, those photographs, and I combined them with short narratives of situations of racism that I experienced growing up. And I didn't put an evaluative kind of spin on the way I told the stories. It was more, this happened to me, this happened to me. And what I wanted to do is I wanted really to create this context where people were asked to make their own evaluation of what's going on here, to create this kind of inner questioning. And ultimately it's that inner questioning, that space that I want to create, and that the new work, What Do You Feel When, is designed to actually create as well. So that's a brief on what I'm bringing.
Akshata?
Sure, yeah. So the work that I did for the gathering 1.0 was called Bloody Boats, which is not the first time I put up the installation. The whole conception, the idea started way back in 2015 while I was traveling from India to UK and other places, and did experience a lot of terrorist attacks and stuff around, which was a common thing in UK, Europe while I was traveling. That triggered this work. Moving on, when I went back, the whole civil war in Syria that was going on, and the news that came on constantly that I kept on reading or listening to motivated me to do this work. The installation was for the first time put up in Artcore UK, which was made up of like 1,500 red paper boards. Since then, it's been traveling to various places, and it did travel to Toronto recently as part of Gathering and few other shows. What my idea through this is to gather people from different cultures, bring them on one platform and let them interact with their stories, their journeys, and they could be good ones, they could be sad ones, but at the end of the day they all have a story to say of their journey, their displacement, their movement, which I think is not too different in terms of ideas. They come together on a single platform, and they do make a great mosaic when it comes to a place like Toronto, where I'm pretty new and discovering the different cultures, different people from various backgrounds, races, and coming together, working together, that triggered this work in a very different manner. It began with a very negative idea of civil wars and migrant crisis and stuff, and now I see how Canada is moving into a positive aspect of it, looking at a good side of it, where we have refugees work together, we have new immigrants work together, we have people from different color background come together with this cliched idea of how the color of all our blood is red. Though it's a cliched idea, I still believe it's the reality, and we cannot be away from it. We cannot keep ourselves away from this whole idea. And that's what my work revolves around, and specifically this project called Bloody Boats talks about.
Wow, that's hard to follow. So I'm an emerging artist, and I think I have less of a background in art. Showing my work. So I am trained as a printmaker, but last year I was working at the Banff Center, and my work started to evolve as I started to explore more my experiences of disability and invisible disability, specifically because I have experienced a horrific concussion a couple of years ago, and it's taken me several years to recover. And it was therapeutic for me to dive into that and use different forms of artwork to express that. And so my work has kind of shifted to be more textile and fabric based, I guess. I've been using yarn to represent thoughts and feelings, and my work has been very, very colorful to help represent how much like how we only have about 12 words to express like colors for the millions of colors that we have in the spectrum of colors to see, I feel that the words that we have to express emotions, thoughts, and feelings don't adequately express those things that we feel. And so I use colors to represent that and to represent the difficulty in expressing ourselves and our experiences as human beings. And so my work, while it's very colorful, it is also trying to share like very complex human experience. And as I started to do more work about disability, I was getting more conversations that started pushing me in this direction to doing more like community-based work, where I wanted the audience to be able to interact and be able to share their own experiences and struggles by interacting with the work. And so when I saw the call for this event, I was inspired to create this new piece called Filling the Gap, where I strung across many pieces of yarn in colorful patterns and then invited the audience to interact with the work by creating cuts and then trying to repair or fill that gap in whatever way they saw fit. And this event has actually, I think, it's gonna like help push my creative practice forward and doing more work like this.
That's
So
very nice.
yeah, I think it's been a very good experience for me as an emerging artist to be involved in something like this. And the reaction with the audience was more than I could have ever imagined. It was very wonderful.
That's great. So you guys all kind of touched upon some of the communities that you've worked with or have worked with in your art. I guess if you could be more specific about some of those communities, and also too, what have been some of the responses that you've received? I'm hoping they're all positive responses, but it'd be interesting to know like what kind of responses that you've had. So I don't know. You want to start, Wayne? I mean, you can. All three of you could also, we can also
Jump
converse
in.
about it. Yeah, yeah.
Sure,
So,
Yeah. Well, my work is intentionally provocative, but when I use the word provocative, I don't mean in a negative sense. What I'm trying to do is I am trying to create something of a dissonance. I am trying to say things aren't as they seem. When you look at this, there's something that goes on inside you, and it's that moment of encounter that you get a response from, and then people decide whether their true response is something that they shove away because socially it's not the right thing to do, or or they just jump into it and they have a knee-jerk response, and then you might have a negative response. So I've had the spectrum of responses to my work. I don't really target one specific community with what I do, because I really feel that my work isn't about racism per se. It isn't about sexism per se. It isn't about genderism per se. It's about all the isms. It is about the way that we consider others who are different from ourselves, and it doesn't matter what your experience, what the color of your skin is. We all have those responses, and I think that there are ways to look at those responses that allows us to take ownership of our feelings in ways that we normally don't. Because when people are, I think, enabled to kind of allowed and created and given the tools to take ownership of what they feel, I think it allows us to have conversations that we don't normally have. Yeah, I really liked what you were saying about your work trying to tease apart some of the complexity of emotions and feelings, because emotions are very much a part of the things that I'm encountering in my work. And you know how it is that so often emotions are discounted.
Yeah.
It's like, the emotions, okay, if we can just get past those, then we can actually have a conversation about something. Well, actually, you know what? No.
It doesn't happen like that. Yeah.
It doesn't happen like that. And we're not machines. We're not little boxes that are plugged together. Our emotions are essential and integrated into the way that we perceive and create the worlds around us. So why not find a way to actually engage those in healthy ways so that we can
validate them too.
Validate.
Yeah, I try to seek that to validate people's feelings every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, it's more like recent that I've been widening my work to be engaging like audiences and stuff. It's like I think before I was creating work like selfishly, just trying to create just my experience, but with encouragement from various mentors that I had last year at the BAM Center, and from audience interaction when we would have open studio events, it helped give me that little push to try engaging an audience, and I became very interested in doing interactive work or performance work. And that's why I was really excited to try this, and it went so well that I'm planning to do more in different ways. But I think mainly I was able to engage with like the disability audience, but I'm very excited that this project was able to reach beyond to other audiences, because I don't think it's just disability based, even though that is my experience that I've come at it from.
Yeah, I think I totally agree to what Wayne and Lisa both had to say, and I think they the whole idea of complexity of any visual art when it interacts with the audience, or when you let the audience break into your zone of visual art, completely distorts the idea that you have. And the interaction with the audience at times surprises me, especially with my installation piece, where way back when I did it for the first time, I let people to walk over those boards, tear off the boards from the wall, or go add on something to the make a new piece, add on, tear off. We had like little kids go interact with it, try make some, but they couldn't, they failed, and they enraged, they tore it apart. And all those emotions, like as Wayne said, they all mix and mingle and becomes a part of it, and you can't really take away from the work. That builds your work more and more. And I don't really target one specific group, but then I've seen a lot of South Asians or a lot of people from Middle East relate to my work, especially because in some way or the other, they've been the boat people sometime in life, and we all have been, or our ancestors have been the boat people sometime in our lives, and that's how the journey, or that's how the displacement began, is what the basis of my whole idea and the concept. But also to talk of, my aim is to lead an improvisation through arts, and that could be critically analyzed when the audiences come into the picture, when they interact with the work. Obviously not all experiences have been positive, per se. Many people do think, oh, that's such a waste of paper, and it's like, okay.
Okay. I took a couple of the boats home, and I still have it sitting on my shelf. So I don't know. I didn't think it was a waste of paper.
It was like, and yeah, you really don't know how to react because you're in that zone of, you think people are relating to it. And I also had people who completely got engrossed and emotional about the whole work. Obviously because of the stories that they had heard or they had themselves been a part of sometime, being in a boat, on the water, under the sky, no place to go, that insecurity that brings in, and that emotion which comes to us wherever we are. Like for me, especially when I moved to Toronto, I did not think I would get assimilated in the culture so quickly, which I have. And I did have this moments of entering and distancing myself on and off, and I see the art community with organizations like the one cultural pluralism in the arts movement is doing, has really helped people like me to bring my artwork or my idea into this new culture for me.
That's wonderful. And I think you guys also touched upon it, but I thought I would ask, how does cultural pluralism, how do you address cultural pluralism in your work? And also too, if you could talk a little bit about your interactive session, because with Wayne's interactive session, it was part of the circle discussion. And the two of you guys, you also involved the audience as well. So if you could, speak a bit about that. So,
sure.
Yeah, I don't know who wants to start, but anyone can jump in.
Okay, so with the interactive piece which I did at the gathering, led people to fold and unfold their stories of journey, which initially the audience got confused with what they're doing, and that's completely what I wanted them to become, like completely unaware of what they're doing, which direction they're heading in, get in that sense of insecurity. What's happening? What am I doing? What's the end of it? And I could see that in people's eyes. I could see that question mark. And as we moved towards the end part of it, when they were supposed to make a boat of it, and they had people around them intervene in their stories as they passed on the paper on which they wrote stuff to others around. And as I believe that life is not just about one person's story, it's about the story that others contribute to us, right? And that's how the life story grows on and mends and builds and goes up and down. and that's what people could realize when they made the board. Like some showed up, some were hidden, and the folds and the unfold that I wanted them to think on closely and also from a distance was my whole motive to do the interactive session with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, because I was involved in that interactive session, I thought it was really interesting with all three of you, like to be an audience. Like, I'm also a visual artist myself, but also like to be an audience, but then to be actually engaged with the visual artist or with the artist. Usually it's like, you know, you see something that's on the wall, you enjoy it, and then you walk away.
Right.
In this case, you as visual artists is asking us to think about what it is that we're actually seeing and what we're actually doing. And I thought that was really interesting and very different from, I guess, the experiences that I've had as an audience and as a visual artist. So Wayne, I think yours was sort of like, it was interesting and it was unexpected.
Yeah, well, I do think that we tend to categorize things and we tend to separate them out. And, you know, my practice has involved photography, it's involved voice work, it's involved video, it's involved digital media. And over the years, there's all these pieces. And for so long, I always saw them as disparate bits. You know, and it's now as I'm getting, you know, into my sort of, let's say, mid part of my career, I'm starting to see the threads, I'm starting to see the connections, and I'm starting to see the places where if I'd only had the language earlier, I would have been able to say what's connecting what. And that's kind of the exciting part I find now, is that there are so many connections. You know, yes, I put some photographs on a wall, but my process is much broader than that. And people want to engage artists in more than just an observer capacity. If there's anything digital media has shown us, it's that. So how then do we open our practice? How do we say, you know what, I'm a photographer, but my practice is about my life, and it's about the ways I'm trying to sense the world and the way I'm going through it, and I'm trying to articulate that so that, you know what, maybe if I do this and I put it out there, if you come alongside me, maybe you're going to find a way to articulate your own story. And that to me is at the core of what excites me. And that's kind of what I wanted to touch on when I did this kind of, I just came up with some words and trying to find what that thread was. And you spoke to it. It's discomfort. You know, and that's a notion that I'm actually been spending a lot of time with. I've been working on another interview that I've been asked to do, and you know, one of the questions was, you know, how important are safe spaces for you? And I know earlier on, I was really concerned with safe spaces, especially because of the sensitivity of the kind of things that we talk about. And as I've gone along, you know, the whole notion of safety, again, safety is not this thing over here and we achieve it and we cheer. Like there's a continuum between safety and threat. And all along that continuum are learning opportunities. And so I think discomfort is a really important place along that continuum. And I think that artists actually, part of my role as an artist is in that place of discomfort. And to use words, to use image, to use whatever it is that we find ourselves in to create these contexts for people to take a second look, to just catch their breath, to whatever it is, so that they're not on autopilot.
And I also completely think that letting people enter your safe space and you feeling confident to enter somebody else's safe space is what the whole idea of inclusion and diversity is for me, especially when I look at these terminologies from the culture here, like the Canadian culture that we speak of. I think it's very rightly said what Wayne just mentioned. The safe space, it's not just like here, or that something that you just find it here, achieve it and be happy about it. No, it's kind of a lifelong process and it goes on, and you have to pass that feeling of safe space from generations to generations. And that's how the cultural fabric that we talk of would come together and build much stronger impact in the community.
And Lisa, yours is really interesting too, because like being able to touch your art, to the artist's work, it's like that's a difficult thing because
Yeah.
I'm
It's
also,
like a sacred
it's
thing.
like, oh,
I don't know if I could do that.
my hands are dirty, but I'll get to touch it. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going for. Is I wanted to remove that preciousness of the artwork
Nice.
and that protection of it. I wanted it to be interactive, where you're getting in there and getting your hands in it. I wanted the audience to be able to feel that tactile feel of it. And I want to jump off how you use the word discomfort. Like, that is perfect. Because I was aiming to take that kind of universal thing of where, trying to find my right words here. I think everyone has their own struggle and their own discomfort with that struggle that they feel as an individual through whatever means, what they are impacted by. But we all feel different and outsiders, and that's what the gap was for me. And in my work, filling the gap. The gap was that way that something is missing, the way we feel different. And I wanted this work to be like a positive look at that. Take something that is a struggle and is hard and make something beautiful out of it, to show that we all have this struggle and we are all very resilient, and together we made this kind of like tapestry weaving, showing ways that we have filled the gap, because we all find our ways to do whatever it takes to cope and move forward and grow as people. And yeah, I wanted people to be able to put their mark on this piece, because I don't think the piece is about me or just my experience. I think it is about all of us in this life. And that's what I was getting at with this work, and the ways that people interacted with it, or ways that I could not have expected, and that was so wonderful to witness and see and observe and be part of. And I don't think, that's all I think I'll have to say about that at the moment.
So what I really liked about that piece was it was that constant flipping back and forth between the literal and the figurative. You know, the literal space, the literal, like the tactile literal space, and I really like how that kind of really solidifies the idea. So it was really strong. It was really strong.
Oh, thank you.
And I wanted to say too with Wayne, after like the round or the circle discussion that, and your what you were speaking about, when I left for the day, I looked at your pieces on the ground outside of Young Place,
Yes.
and me and another friend, we really looked to see, and realizing it's like we're stepping over your face. There's one on the post, and it's like, because
It's kind of everywhere.
you're everywhere. But it sort of made you think further about your image rather than just like, oh, it's there. So, and just thinking along the lines of what you were talking about discomfort and having, and just I thought it was really powerful in that sense. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm interested about when you put work in the public sphere, because as an artist, you kind of are a bit of a control freak for context.
Right.
And you're like, I want the work to be seen this way so people will get what I'm trying to say. And as soon as you start putting work in the public context, you gotta let it go.
Yeah.
Because you don't have control over it.
Yeah.
And with What Do You Feel When, I actually didn't put the posters up myself. Part of the project was hiring a media company to put 1,000 of them across Canada. And so they were already up, and I flew across the country to be with the posters and photograph them and write on
That's
them.
interesting.
And then I had to leave them.
Right.
And so then that makes me think, okay, I'm letting go of the control of this.
Yeah.
And there's something in that process, and as you both talked about, that when every idea is a great idea until it encounters people.
Yes.
And then it becomes something else. And
It's beautiful chaos.
it's a beautiful chaos. And I think that there's a real, I can speak for myself, there's a real learning in that for me. Because, hey, let's face it, part of being an artist is being a control freak.
Yeah.
And yet there's so much more that our work becomes when we open spaces to allow other people to find their way into it.
Right. And I think it's also challenging for a visual artist to distance oneself from their own artwork, which I think your process of like hiring a media company to do it, distancing yourself from the work, looking at as a audience at your own work, lets the external factor act on it, and lets you to be in a space where you could think on your work again, like rethink about it in a different context.
Yes.
And I think, that's amazing.
Well, I like to break down the traditional boundary of audience participant, and a great example of where this works for me is in a workshop that I do. In that, everything I do is poster based, and so what I do is we'll as a group around a particular community and put up their images, and I've been doing it for so long that I kind of forget about all the stuff that goes on internally when you do it. But to see people doing it for the first time, and that sense of vulnerability, the sense of all the stuff that goes through your mind, it's really fascinating. And I really, as we're also talking about things where we're going to be going as well, like that's a part of my work that I'm going to be continuing to open up, is kind of that space of how can I continually integrate people into this, because it's not just about me. It starts with my narrative, but it's about all of our narratives.
So I'm just going to wrap up. I'm just wondering, like, what are a couple or one or two upcoming projects that you've got? It sounds like you might be doing a workshop, Wayne, or is that something you'd like to do eventually?
Well, I do them, and I'm available to do them, absolutely. I don't have one on the books at the moment. I will be in February doing a lecture. I work with the Toronto Art Therapy Institute, actually, and they've been amazing. I've worked with them for over 9 years, and that has been a great context for me to work on ideas and develop this part of my practice. The project, What Do You Feel When? It's ongoing, and one of the things I like about the poster is I put up a poster, then I photograph the poster, then I put the poster onto social media, and then it lives again, and it lives again, and it continually, every time the image is put out there, it provides another opportunity for questioning. And I think that's really one of the strengths of it, and so the project continues in that vein.
And Akshata?
Well, talking of what's upcoming, there are a lot of things, and I'm working on this piece called The Great Wall. And the name says it all, like the great is in the inverted commas, and the whole scenario that's up the south of states, like South Mexico and states, the whole thing that we see in news and media all the time. So that's kind of a series that I'm working on at the present, apart from being involved in different arts organizations in Toronto, teaching, working as an arts administrator, and balancing between being a visual artist and all of this. But yes, for sure, I think public intervention is what I seek for, and I'm looking for much more, like paper is fragile material, but then when I take those boards outdoors in public there, where I have this dream project of making like 1 million boards gushing over
Millions.
somewhere, like that.
Some minions to help.
Yes, and I aim at engaging like 1 million people then, that's how vast I see that project as. And let's see where it goes.
And Lisa, what are you?
I don't officially have anything on the books yet, but I'm applying for a couple different things in this community-based kind of realm. And I'll see where those go. And then there are some projects that I had tried at the BAM Center that I want to try redoing, but in a more modular form, because some of them I was making quite like large scale, which is excellent. It looks very like awe-inducing when you do that, but how do you transport that on a budget? So I'm trying to learn how to make my work still have the same impact, but be collapsible or modular to move, to easily put up at different locations as needed, since I want to make these works open to the public and interactive. So working on resolving those issues, and just applying for different things, different residencies that are happening next year that I hope I can get.
Well, great. Well, thank you all for coming and chatting with me.
Thank you for
and,
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having
It
us
was great.
here. Yeah.
That's it.